Please welcome back Jonathan Alter.
I'm really sorry that my partners, Steve McCarthy and John Block, they literally couldn't get through the Lincoln Tunnel. There's gridlock, and I thought they were going to make it by the middle of the film, but they didn't. All three of us are from Montclair, New Jersey. I just happened to be in New York before it started snowing, so I'll have to represent the two of them.
Well, Jonathan, let me start by asking what your experience was of Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill when you first started reading them, how they made an impression on you.
So I actually, both John Block and I grew up in Chicago, and our guy, and somebody very influential on me, was somebody, just a quick picture of Mike Royko, who was sort of the Jimmy Breslin of Chicago. But then when I moved to New York in the early 80s, I started reading, well, I had read as a little kid, I had read The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight and Can Anyone Here Play This Game? And then after Watergate, I read a book that Jimmy wrote about Watergate. And so I became, intrigued with both of them. And I mentioned in the film that I was writing a kind of a critical piece about Jimmy. And, he said, "You fuck with me, I'll fuck with you, I'll fuck you, I'm the fucking John Gotti of journalism." And he slams down the phone, and I'm sort of, wondering what's going to happen. But after my piece came out, he liked me because I was, a little tough on him. And we became friends, and I'd see him, he'd call me, not identifying who he was, and start reaming out the political press corps that I was part of. I was writing a column about politics, and I'd go over to Jimmy and Ronnie's house sometimes. And then I met Pete a little after that, around the time he wrote a book about Frank Sinatra, which is a wonderful book. We didn't deal with the books and novels that both of them wrote. Sinatra's not in the film because it would have cost us a complete fortune to use any of his music. And then I'm not sure if Emily Eldridge is here or not, and that's Ronnie did make it. Oh, that's so great. Oh, Ronnie. Give a hand for Ronnie Eldridge. So Ronnie's daughter, Emily, lives in Montclair, New Jersey, where Steve, John, and I are all from. And I was jogging one day, and I ran into Emily, and I said, "How's Jimmy?" her stepfather. She said, "Well, he's not so good. I don't know how much longer he's going to be around." And I said, "Is anybody going over and just getting all those great stories that he has with a camera or tape recorder?" She said, "People have tried over the years, but it's never really happened." And Steve, my partner, is a great cinematographer. We had worked together on a number of pieces for the Today Show and NBC Nightly News together over the years. And John Block it was a legendary Dateline NBC producer. And we all knew Emily, and I knew Jimmy, and so we picked up Pete one day and brought him over to Jimmy's apartment, and we just started talking to them on spec. We didn't have any kind of deal, but because Steve is a shooter, a cinematographer, it really wasn't costing us much to start to shoot them. Then we got some interviews, and it turned out a lot of celebrities were very willing to talk to us because they revered Breslin and Hamill. Put together a little sizzle reel, and HBO liked it. So that's sort of the genesis of it, and we worked on it for 3 years, on and off.
Well, we'd love to take questions from the audience. We have some microphones that can come to you, so if you put your hand up, we will bring you a microphone. Don't be shy. Here we go, right here.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if they kind of expressed any additional opinions that weren't shown in the film about modern, the direction of journalism today.
Yes, they did. And actually, we asked everybody about Trump and what was going on now. And, Robert De Niro, who has one soundbite in the film, he's a famously not so great interview, but when I asked him about Trump, of course, he lit into Trump, as did pretty much everybody. But we made a decision. Originally, we were going to have a little bit about what's going on now in the film, and I think I can give you an insight into the way things work at HBO. Nancy Abraham, first Jeff Bartz, our editor, said, you don't really have to have very much of that. And we still had a little bit. And then Nancy said, that's the subtext of your whole film. You don't need to do this. This is, you don't have to tell people this because it burbles up through the film. So at one point we had a soundbite of Mike Lupica saying, I wonder what these guys would do if they were writing now. And we didn't need it because it's one of the themes of the film. We didn't really want, we had Trump in it at the beginning, and we didn't really want to dignify him by having him in it any more than that.
Who's got a hand right here? We'll get your mic.
How did you settle on the rhythm of going back and forth between the two, and is that something that's stuck or changed a lot?
It changed a lot, and this was an extremely hard film to edit. I think it's okay, Jeff, if I say that Jeff is an Oscar-winning editor, and I think he said that in 35 years it was the hardest film he ever edited. 50 years, it was the hardest film he ever edited, because it was really 5 movies in one. I thought originally it was 2 movies in one, Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill, which was hard enough to figure out how to weave them together. And then it was also a film about New York, the old New York, and I hope a film about journalism, and then a film about writing. And we made a decision to use a lot of their writing. How many people here thought that was Jimmy Breslin's voice on his writing? I'm just curious. Yeah, good, okay. So what happened was, you might have seen the credit, and he couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately, but Michael Rispoli, he played Tony Soprano's father in the flashback episodes in The Sopranos, and he's been in a lot of other things. And he just did a fabulous Jimmy Breslin. Jimmy wasn't quite strong enough to read his own material. Pete has this beautiful voice, and he did read his material, but we really wanted people to have a sense of their writing. So a lot of the difficulty was in choosing from a tremendous number of stories that they were involved in, figuring out which ones had the pictures that we could use, and then also integrating it with what we called Rispoli's. That's what we called the little bits of their writing. But the answer to your question is with difficulty.
Question right here. The
Cheryl.
microphone.
This is Cheryl Gould, great NBC News producer, next to Bill Wheatley, another great NBC News producer. And all 3 of us are veterans of NBC News. I'm the only one who still works there, but part-time. Cheryl.
Wonderful, wonderful film.
Thank you.
So much for doing it. And I wish John and Steve could be here. But anyhow, I have 2 questions. One, is there anyone out there today who you think embodies their heritage and who has a kind of voice, not the same, but who has that kind of magic in their writing and in their insights, number 1. And number 2, how was it working with 2 other directors?
Okay. So in answer to the first question, so a couple of the faces you saw, Leonard Pitts at the Miami Herald, Steve Lopez at the LA Times, they're still writing. And there are a number of other local columnists who are trying to do this. But the decline of local news is a huge problem. And as Nick Pileggi said, somebody new comes along, and there is some great journalism being done now, great investigative journalism, and they're videographers, and they have a lot of voice. There are bloggers, and they have a lot of voice. When I asked Jimmy about this, he wasn't really worried. He said it doesn't really matter whether it's in newspapers or online, and people are going to come along and do this. But it is a particular kind of 20th century journalism that is gone, and we had a lot of difficulty trying to not make it too much of a nostalgic story, so that we didn't want to paint a picture of, everything's gone to hell now, and there are good people coming along. My daughter, my wife Emily is here, and our other daughter Molly, but our older daughter Charlotte is a writer for Time magazine. She just went out and did a video about women candidates who were elected in the midterms. It had a lot of voice in it, and her fiance writes a column for Newsday for AM New York that has a lot of voice in it. So there are people trying to do this, but they'll never be Breslin and Hamill. In answer to your second question, we finally realized, I think the idea of 3 directors at first, maybe throughout, drove Jeff and Angela, our editors, nuts, but 3 is in some ways easier than 2, because when we disagreed, we voted. Like, do we want that shot? And we basically argued over every shot in the film. We argued over everything, and we were editing it for a year. And several times we had to take it to a vote, and it was easier with 3. And also there were different people with different strengths. So, Steve was the shooter and his family. Some of his, Justin and Ryan are here. I don't know whether Allie is here or not. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Allie is here. Great. So we got a lot of help from Steve's family, and Kenny, a friend, helped on the shooting, and I think Steve did a magnificent job with the cinematography. And John Block is just relentless. So the scene, just to give you one of many examples, in Arlington Cemetery, where the stepson of the gravedigger, walks through the cemetery to his stepfather's grave, and at first they said no, and I thought, I'm gonna use all my Washington influence. I'm gonna get us into Arlington Cemetery. I was completely shut down. I appeal it to a higher court. Shut down, shut down, shut down. John Block figured out how to get us in to Arlington Cemetery, and he did that on a number of other elements that we needed. So we all kind of complemented each other, and I think it really was, I was going to say a 3-person effort, but really it was a 5-person effort, because Angela and Jeff, our editors, were so much a part of the making of this film. So.
We have to wrap up there. I do want to say you're the first audience in the world to see Breslin and Hamill, Deadline Artists. It's
so
coming to HBO.
Yes, it premieres on HBO on January 28th. So tell your friends.
So you don't have long to wait.
Thank you.
We made this our closing night selection for Doc NYC with great intentionality, because we think this film is a terrific, sums up the spirit of Doc NYC. It's New York, it's journalism. Jonathan, we thank you and Steve and John for bringing us this project. Thank you for coming. Hope you come back to Doc NYC next year. Thanks to Jonathan Alter.
Thanks, Tom.